Hey everybody, welcome to episode 7 of the Combat Chain podcast. I'm your host, Adam Filipchuk, and I'm not going to beat around the bush. I'm just going to get right into it. We've had a change in hosts. Andrew and Jeff have both decided to leave the podcast. They've decided to go on and do other things, and I wish them all the best moving forward, but the show must go on. And I went and I reached out and managed to find somebody else who is interested in making content and keeping the combat chain going. And I'd like to introduce to everybody Pat Shaw. Pat, how's it going?
Hey, Adam, it is great to be here. Thanks for having me. I'm super pumped to be on the combat chain with you, and I'm excited for this episode and what we can do together.
Awesome. That makes me so excited to hear. So for I guess it's 2022, new year, new us. A lot has changed in these past couple weeks for myself. So Pat and I got connected after I got recruited by another individual by the name of Max Thomas. For those of you who don't know, he runs a weekly event called the Fighters Guild, Monday nights on Discord. He also does some content. He's ridden for the Wraith Times, really great guy, super skilled player. He's put together a testing team. Right now we're focusing just on the 2022 ProQuest season. Who knows where it'll go moving forward. And I had interacted with Pat prior to on different events. We've seen each other in kitchen table games events. I reached out in Max Thomas's group, and Pat reached out, said he'd also been looking at creating content. Pat's a bit newer to the game. He's been playing since Monarch, but and I'll let him introduce himself a little bit better. But a few impressive accolades already. He's managed to take down a Fighters Guild event, which is saying something. There's some pretty good players who show up for that. On top of that, he's managed to come in top 4 in a 64 player skirmish in season 3 here. So right off the bat, Pat's shown some promise in Flesh and Blood, and I know he's super keen on testing hard and hitting the 2022 ProQuest season head on. But to tell a little bit more about himself, Pat, why don't you tell us how you got into TCGs, your background, and what you're hoping to accomplish?
Sure. So I started playing Magic the Gathering, as many people have. I started in 1997. I think it makes me kind of a boomer in the Magic world, but I picked up my first Portal demo pack from a Electronic Gaming Monthly magazine when I was 9 years old, and I made my parents start buying me Portal starter decks and starter set cards, and really never looked back. So played casually for, call it 15, 20 years through high school. Played a lot of just, built decks through trading and cracking packs and doing it the old school way, all the way up through until Magic Online, comes out in 2002. Started playing that a little bit, trying to get a little competitive on that, on and off for a little while. Stayed with it, but started trying to get competitive in 2015 in cons. Con standard, made it to a PTQ in West Virginia with the very last PTQ before they changed the system to the PPTQs. So it was in that. I've never really done anything super competitive on Magic, but after, so I did that. Started getting into Commander, big. And so before the pandemic, I was getting very much into Commander and the EDH scene. So started really focusing my efforts as a casual Magic player, collecting, and just, brewing, building. Once the pandemic hit, found Discord, Spell Table, EDH Online, Discord, and played super heavily. Equipped myself to play online for the next couple of years through that, I suppose with that access is kind of a double-edged sword. You have all these games to play, and Magic ended up being something that wasn't that fun for me anymore after so long. There's a myriad of reasons: product burnout, power level conversations, trying to find the right game for the right environment. And in May, June-ish, is the release of Monarch Unlimited. I started getting into Flesh and Blood. Flesh and Blood is something that's been on my radar since 2019. I've been watching Rudy, Alpha Investments, and other kind of content like that. So I've heard of Flesh and Blood for a while, and it's one of the first games that really kind of piqued my interest. It's Magic for 20 plus years at this point. And once I kind of realized I was getting out of Magic at the same time, I decided to see what else was out there, and I went into Flesh and Blood. And when I started playing Flesh and Blood, I realized that it was the game I should have been playing the whole time. The type of Magic game that I wanted to play was so hard to find, but that kind of interactive, combat-based, balanced environment is what Flesh and Blood brings to the table. So already being set up online play with EDH, I've been playing Flesh and Blood obsessively, we'll be honest, for the better part of the year. I do a lot of travel for work, but part of that travel has enabled me to put in a lot of time off the clock into Flesh and Blood. So I've been extensive online play. I participate in as many armories as I can. You see me a lot on the main server, kitchen table, obviously the Fighters Guild, and just constantly jamming games. I think in the last few months in particular, I've really turned a corner in my play, really honing it, realizing that this game is, the game that I feel like I've been meant to play. I'm kind of exploring where I can take that competitively. So that, taking my play more seriously, my deck construction more seriously, trying to rack up some wins in XP. I just cracked top 200 in 90 day, which is big for me. Something that I've been tracking and trying to get up there. I'd like to get into the top 100 and maintain that. And seeing where that goes. So part of that journey has led me to a lot of different highly ranked, competitive players and community, content creators, and I've had a blast interacting with everybody, talking with them, playing with them, and it was playing against guys like in the Fighters Guild that made me realize that I might have something to contribute to the game. And so this is the first game I felt like I want to talk about. And, this is why I jumped on the opportunity to be on the podcast with you. And I'm happy to be here. I love Flesh and Blood. I love talking about it. I like thinking about it. I like building decks. I like doing everything Flesh and Blood related. So that's what I'm here to do. And like I said, thanks for having me.
And I'm so excited to have you aboard. Your energy and your enthusiasm is palpable. I'm really excited to see what you and myself can do together, working on the content that we're hoping to create. Before we get into the news of the week, Andrew, Jeff, and I would always kind of just recap our week in Flesh and Blood and talk about if we had any kind of interesting matches or insights or anything like that. And Just quickly, why don't you, I know you said when we were chatting before the episode, you said you did have one match that you really wanted to highlight. So why don't you let us know about it?
Sure. So I'm on the, I'm a member of the Kitchen Table TCG server, and they have a monthly league. I had my first round matchup the other night, and I'm playing Bravo this month. It's the first time in a while that I've played Bravo. Bravo is kind of my back to the basics hero. So I've been on a Briar kick for a while, and so you get lost in the the aggro shuffle there a little bit. Bravo, I find, is one of those heroes that really lets you get down to the basics, and being good at Bravo, I think, makes you good at the game at general. So I like to bust that out every once in a while. So my first round matchup was against a Raiden Bolton. It was a really back and forth affair. I think it was one of the games where I needed to focus on correct discipline plays, correct pitch. I got some nasty habits of wanting to do all the things with all the cards and making the discipline block play, and things like saving armor late, arsenaling your pummels, being okay with attacking with Anathos and not trying to overreach, and setting up for big turns are all things that you need to do with Bravo. And it was a game that, had I not tried to be so disciplined in that, I would have lost. I was able to get some timely Sigil of Solace late in the game to add 9 life to my total, which definitely helped, and was able to set up for a solid end game with a dominated Spinal Crush when he was at 2 with no armor left, and that sealed the game. And it was one of those ones. It took a while. My adrenaline was pumping. It was one of those games that you just feel the intensity about, even if it's just this, it's between two, it's a preliminary matchup in Swiss, but that kind of it's one of those kind of games that remind me just how good Flesh and Blood is, and how viable all the heroes are with a good pilot. The Bolton pilot was very, very good, so it was definitely put me through the through my paces to get through that match in one piece. So I was happy I did, and it was a fun game. And this week,
and that's super cool to hear. I definitely like the parts where you talk about making the discipline plays. I think that's where, and we've talked about it before on the show, like your game plan, knowing what your game plan is and committing to that game plan and not deviating from it. And I've said this before, where like sometimes the game plan is to know to pivot and know when to pivot. And maybe like for the first half of the game you're going to apply pressure, in the second half of the game you're gonna try to fatigue them out, but you needed to kind of like deal it, like if you need to deal some damage first just to kind of bring the game into a winnable place, versus other times where the game plan is to know, like right off the bat, I need to be on the back foot. I need to play defensively, and like you said, protect your armor and wait till you kind of just chip them down with the Nothos into that late game. That's when you had your opportunity to dominate and win the game out, because you still had your armor and you still probably had a little bit of life, and you had the resources you needed to be able to enact your win condition. And patience, the patience that you demonstrated in that game is what allowed you to win it. And I think that's such a good example of sticking to your game plan. And even on the
definitely. And
sorry, go ahead.
Obviously, Bravo is one of those heroes where like it's so antithetical, like I said, from what I'm used to with like Briars and like other aggro decks, where like especially early game, like you're gonna block out with your hand. You might have something set up with a defense reaction in Arsenal or something like that, but you're still thinking about like, okay, it is okay here to block out. you're not necessarily losing tempo here. This is what this deck wants to do. It's defensive heavy. You know, kind of recognizing that. For me, it's one of those things where it's like, okay, this is a defensive hand. I'm okay with losing it. I'm gonna draw up, and when I'm ready to pivot, I'll see it, and it's not now. So I'm okay with, you know, putting these cards in the bin for now.
Yeah. And
that's what I was going to add to that.
No, and that's perfect. And it's, recognizing that, just like you said, like, oh, I've got a defensive hand. Like, I think so many people are so inclined to be like, oh, this, even if my game plan was to fatigue, like, this is such a good hand that I want to play this hand out. I want to take the damage for it. But like, if your game plan is fatigue, for example, you need to preserve as much life as possible, because sometimes that 1 or 2 life points at the end will make the difference. And if you weren't playing that true dedicated fatigue right from the beginning, you're not going to make the distance. And to even further this example, if I can touch into my last week in Fab, I had one really good game that actually came down to that one last life point. I was playing Prism Fatigue into a chain, and I had my sideboard kind of set up for fatigue. I had Sinks and Fates, and I knew going into the chain match, I was like, I think the only way I win this is if I fatigue it. I managed to, like, I think I won the dice roll. I got to go second, and I managed to get 1 or 2 hits right in at the beginning. And then he started to finally be able to apply some real pressure, and I had to take the back foot. I think I was still at 40 health when he applied pressure, so I was able to start on the back foot where I wanted to be. But I remember even like getting down to kind of starting to get like from the mid game into the late game, and I'm down to maybe 18, 17, 16 health, somewhere around there, and he's on Soul Shackle 4, and I'm thinking like, I'm not going to win this game. And I've got that sinking feeling in my chest, and I just had to, you know what, I had to pick myself back up and go, you know what, no, stick to the game plan. Let's ride it out to the end, play to your out. And it came down to the bitter end. I was making the jankiest plays to keep my shields up to protect myself from his arcane damage, doing things like blocking Rosetta with a soul shield. Like, that is not a value block. That is not efficient. But I recognized that I needed to. That was my out to keep making shields.
Playing to your outs. Just because no one else knows what's going on.
Yeah,
doesn't mean you do.
Yeah,
you know?
And I got, like I said, he brought me down to 1, and I managed to just barely fatigue him. Got him on the blood debt, and that was the same, just like Pat describes his match. Like, that one was the adrenaline rush, and felt good to manage to bring it out. I actually managed to that was the match that decided on my Friday Night Armory, allowed me to win my my Valda for the month, so that was pretty exciting. And then that little bit of XP put me up into, for the first, lovely, that's gonna ping right on our
we're real people, you know.
Managed to put me into first place on the top 90 day Canadian leaderboard, so that was pretty exciting as well.
Well, congratulations!
Thanks, Pat,
on reaching number 1.
So I've been able to hold down number 1 for about 4 or 5 days now, and we'll see how long I can hold it down for. We've got some pretty strong players here in Canada. I mean, you guys do too in the States, but all of North America.
Canada's definitely very strong. That's a great player base up there. I think it seems, you know, you guys are pretty spread out anyways, because Canada. But
sorry, go ahead.
No, you just I think it's a high concentration of very competitive players. I get very afraid running into a Canadian player when I know they're from there.
That makes me,
because I know it's going to be a very tough matchup no matter what.
No, that makes me glad to hear that us Canucks are keeping pace with everybody else. that's our week, our interesting matches in Flesh and Blood this week. We've got a little more news to dip into, and then into the main topic. Before we get into kind of the main news, we're going to be talking about more about spoilers. We have a lot going on there. But before that, just quickly, Card Market is now officially signed up. They've acknowledged Flesh and Blood. They're doing the thing. They've got their own page for it. So that's cool. Following suit with CFB and TCG Player, and we're seeing bit by bit the game's growing, and more people are picking it up and acknowledging it, and that's really cool for the game. Elsewhere in news, this isn't directly Flesh and Blood related, but it does impact us, and I think it's something important for us to talk about because of the fact that we, within our community, and something that people, especially people who come from Magic, are always so quick to pick up on, is how inclusive we are and how accepting and welcoming we are, and how everybody belongs. The collectors, the players, the competitive players, the casual players, everybody comes in, all forms, shapes, sizes, colors, orientations. Like, we welcome everybody, and we're unapologetic about that, and I think that's so cool. And a platform that is commonly used to test and play Flesh and Blood, TTS. There was some controversy with the developers, Berserk Games, that I think we should acknowledge, because we have the opportunity as a player base to kind of choose and vote about where we spend our time and the platforms we use. Pat, I'm actually going to cut to you to get you to tell us a little bit more about it.
The Cliffs Note version is that user Zoe Allred was getting kicked in chat rooms for using the word gay, while other words like straight and cis were being ignored. She had a pretty negative interaction with a moderator. TTS has since pulled the chat temporarily, and has released a statement, condoning or condemning the conduct of the moderator. And they said, quote, Tabletop Simulator has not and does not condone equating sexual orientation, gender identity with fetishes, politics, or anti-family friendly sentiment. I think that trading card games in their communities in general, not to get on a soapbox, but I think are, like you had mentioned, very inclusive. But I think it's a pretty good reminder that it's it very quickly and easily can become a toxic environment for a specific section of that community, and you kind of have to be mindful of what you're saying, who you're saying it to, at all times, because you don't know who could be negatively affected by your words or your policies there. So I think Flesh and Blood in particular has picked up the mantle of inclusivity. There's some other trading card communities out there that have gotten toxic over time, but I like where Flesh and Blood stands at the moment. I support the inclusivity of everyone, as you do as well. And I think we're proud of the Flesh and Blood community as a whole for, kind of standing up to that. And it's definitely something that, we should be keeping our eye on. So not just in Flesh and Blood, but elsewhere. I think TTS is aware of that. How they handle that situation is going to be a telling indicator of how they feel moving forward. And if you agree or disagree with what they're doing, then there are definitely ways that you can show that, either through your wallet or otherwise.
Yeah, and further to kind of follow up on that, now a little more response from Berserk Games as well. The one thing they did do is they did take down their global chat. There is no global chat feature in TTS currently, and I don't know if that's the right answer. It helps level the playing field, I guess, but it's still, I think, pushes away. It kind of makes the message that, like, we just don't want to touch the subject. So I guess short term it's an okay response, but long term I think they need to show a little bit more, just to kind of help exemplify that, hey, we are an ally and we are on the right team. Yeah, the ball's in for a platform that's so widely used for us as Flesh and Blood players. The ball's in Berserker Games' court. Whether they decide to really make this wrong right, or they just kind of go, they try to sweep it under the rug. Time will tell. Should the latter occur, I think it's important for us as players to kind of go, you know what? No, we're not okay with that, and either demand that they make wrongs right, or turn to another platform, whether that be there's a ton of online platforms popping up right now. Felt Table's one of them, fleshandbloodonline.com. I know I was doing a little bit of digging today, and I found Tabletopia kind of has a workshop system just like TTS does, and furthermore, Tabletopia can be played on the iPhone, so that'd be sweet. I could play Flesh and Blood at work. I'd be stoked for that. So we'll
any opportunity to play Flesh and Blood at work.
Exactly. Then I can just I can delete Arena off my phone. Then I don't have to play Arena anymore. But on the tail end of that, some huge news is literally dropping right now as we're recording.
This is a good omen. This is great.
Yeah.
This is fantastic.
It is.
This is the kind of energy we bring to the Flesh and Blood community. We force LSS to take immediate action.
So for those who aren't aware yet, by the time this will be by the time this episode's live, this will be pretty well in circulation. Everybody will be aware. But right now, I have chills.
We're scooping this. We're scooping it.
This is it.
This is the hottest. The hottest of the hots, right here. Unbelievable.
Banned and restricted announcement update. There is a functional errata on Briar. So Briar now reads, the first time an action card you control deals damage to an opposing hero each turn, create an embodiment token. You are now only able to make one embodiment per turn. Furthermore, we are seeing Ball Lightning banned in Classic Constructed, Plunder Run banned in Classic Constructed, Ball Lightning banned in Blitz, and Duskblade banned in Blitz.
That is a whole lot to unpack right there. There's a lot going on there.
Now, this is so fresh that I haven't even had a chance to read this whole article yet. But I'm just picking through, and I've noticed they're talking about this past national season, Briar made up 63% of the Living Legend points, and that is the biggest reason they are making this change, this emergency change. We weren't supposed to get our next BNR announcement until February 2nd, and they didn't want to meddle with the meta mid-season, and they've decided that this is so pressing that they need to address this right away. I think this is a really good thing from LSS because it, like Pat just said, this shows that everything that we were saying as the player base is being acknowledged. B, it shows that LSS, like I've said in the past, is willing to put the player base first. They don't, they're not like, well, and we saw this when they came out and said that Duskblade was too powerful for CC, and we've seen in Seeds getting banned because they didn't want Chain to be too oppressive. Like, we've seen that LSS cares, and this is just a further confirmation of that.
My personal opinion is that I think Plunder Run is a victim of ubiquity, but there's a lot of cards that can be considered ubiquitous in Flesh and Blood, and I think that I just think that opens up a bit. But I get it. I don't have a deck that doesn't run Plunder Run. So that should have been telling me something, I suppose. I knew that I knew there was rumblings. I knew that the player base kind of wanted to see Plunder Run out. Good, once you're running 9 of a card like that, then that's when things get... that's when then the red flags start popping up.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? I'll tell you what, Ball Lightning is a little surprising there.
That one surprised me too.
I guess that's. Did they give a good reason? Yeah. Well, let's. Do you mind if I just read it off here? Means. Let's see. Well, let's go. We'll start on the Plunder Run. All right. It is normal, this is straight from the website here, it is normal for 6 to 9 copies of Plunder Run to be included in Briar and Chain decks. While drawing multiples of this card is clunky, it takes a full turn cycle to set it up for maximum impact. This card is often the linchpin of the spikiest turn that are often irrecoverable from. That's a good word. The release of both Lightning Press and Spellbound Creepers has added additional potency to an already pushed card effect. Of concern, even more so than the power level of the card, is the play experience it creates. Plunder Run frequently makes hand evaluation default to defend with my entire hand and hope for the best. We believe this play pattern that occurs multiple times per game due to the prevalence of Plunder Run is not aligned with positive play experience. Referring to Ball Lightning looks innocuous on the surface and does lend itself to some interesting gameplay. The decision to ban Ball Lightning is mostly centered around reducing the consistency of the Briar deck in support of opening the door to other aggressive decks to re-enter the metagame. Ball Lightning typically is played as a 6 of in Classic Constructive and 4 of in Blitz, giving Briar decks the critical mass of Lightning cards for fuse effects, attack action cards that Weave Lightning can buff, and perhaps most importantly, attack action cards with unconditional go again. Without Ball Lightning, card selection tension and trade-offs exist when considering Briar deck construction. Ball Lightning ticked too many boxes. Post errata and bans, we expect Briar to continue to be a competitive deck that is also enjoyable to play against. Referring to Duskblade, overall the Blitz metagame is in a good place based on win rates from Skirmish Season 3. Despite this, we have heard feedback from store managers and players across the world that Duskblade is simply an unfun card, with common sentiment being that it creates a very one-dimensional game experience of playing versus Duskblade rather than playing Flesh and Blood. Duskblade was on the watch list following its ban in Classic Constructed and is now being added to the Blitz ban list in order to promote positive play experience. Yeah, between that and the errata, I get it on the errata, right? There have been, I've been on Hybrid Briar, being able to string attacks and know that I can super efficiently block with one card coming up is one of the best parts about it. You know, you start lining up your defensive plays based on how many embodiments you have, and you start getting nervous when you don't have embodiments to block, and your opponent knows it too, right? That's your opponent's opportunity to pivot as a Briar player when you've whiffed in some way, can't leak damage, and can't get your embodiments up there. I think it changes between the Ball Lightning and the embodiment errata. I think it changes pretty drastically how Briar is going to be built moving forward. And Plunder Run, you're really taking a lot of what used to be the legs here, right? Plunder from Arsenal, Plunder creating an embodiment of Lightning into Snatch for 7 if you hit draw 3 with a Lightning Press. In Magical Christmas Land, that actually kind of happened a lot more than you might think, and it's really frustrating as the defending player to really have to figure out that math and know that that chain's going to continue no matter what, because you're either going to block out, or they're going to do something silly to leak that damage over and draw their cards anyways. But I don't know if I saw this coming, that's for sure, especially on the errata side.
Yeah, I actually am a little surprised by the errata. I think the errata is appropriate, but I think I'm surprised just because erratas are cumbersome and they cause confusion in the game. Now new players getting in, if they get an old Briar, they don't know where to look. Like they have, their stuff is out of date, and that is effectively
right. The Briar I have is now not the correct Briar.
Exactly.
Now we have to explain that to people.
So
as the game goes on,
but I think the errata is appropriate. I think there was comments made that as an aggro deck, fundamentally, Briar did break the rules. Like, as an aggro deck, as you go, you should lose resources. You shouldn't gain. You shouldn't be able to do all this damage and then turn around and make a block for 4 or 6 with one card because you have all these embodiments. So I think that was the right call. I think
I'll say that I thought if anything, I thought that they would errata the embodiment of Lightning token, and or both of them to include only Rune Blade or Elemental actions being what triggered it, because I think one of the biggest strengths of Briar, and it seems to be, you know, kind of one of the complaints is that there's so many generics run in there that if you isolated it to your elemental cards, you would still be competitive, but you would narrow the build by a lot. But that's just what I thought. I was just reading the tea leaves. I thought something like that would come around in the embodiment of Lightning. I'll say that the embodiment of Earth token is still kind of a shock, as like on the way that I've played Briar. I still hate losing the card. So very rarely did those embodiments come into play unless they absolutely had to. And of course, when they did, it was great to have 4 or 5 of them, which is the problem. But I do know that it came up very far and few between. But I could have sworn that non-attack, the 2 non-attacks, creating the embodiment of Lightning, would have been what would have been changed. But that one stays the same, though. I mean, so there's definitely, you're not losing your go again efficiency. So you can definitely make your attacks that were never meant to go again still have it. But you're definitely going to have to replace Plunder Run now with something else.
And I mean, you've got options for like Briar alone. Flash is, I think, a good option. That's a 0 cost. That fuses. You've got Electrify Red. You've got Weave Lightning's good. Yeah. Like there's
I think the Weaves, right? Weave Lightning probably comes in right now for Plunder Run. I don't think there's much else. I'm trying to think off the top of my head.
See maybe
what would draw a card.
Force of Nature maybe starting to get played in Cheerios Briar now.
Yeah.
Because it's still a blue pitches. The only downside is you're not going to be able to fuse it.
Yeah.
But if you weave, you could like weave Lightning.
Yeah, definitely. And I've seen Force, at least on the Blitz side of things, Lightning Briar with Force of Nature started to kind of rear its head in season 3 as a nice variant, extra blue for Kano matchups and. Blocks, I believe it blocks 3.
Yes, it does. So it can no longer block for more than 4, but still a 4 block off an embodiment's really good.
Yeah. Yes, it is. Between that and Pulse of Candlehold is a 3 block that can now block max 4.
Yeah.
And Channel Mount Heroic blocks max 4.
Yeah. So
now as well.
Maybe we'll see. I bet you off this we do see more Channel Mount Heroic Briar now. I bet you Hybrid Briar does become stronger. And maybe Channel Mount Heroic will be next on the chopping block.
Yeah, right. If that takes it over, I definitely know I'm gonna have to make some changes in my deck. It's right next to me, but I've got I get 8 Ball Lightnings and 5 Plunder Runs coming out, and we'll think about what goes in there. Now,
something of note here: Australia and New Zealand nationals are exempt from this ban. And
that's a very good point.
I just noticed that here now. Side events are still included, but the main events will be exempt. So they are keeping in mind the current meta and not wanting to mess with the people's.
Their play testing is still intact. They can test for the current meta,
which is, I think, that's a good move on LSS's part. I applaud that.
Yeah, I think so.
I applaud that, but wow, this is huge
news. What about Duskblade for you? How do you feel about the Duskblade being banned?
I think it's right as well. I mean, it's Duskblade was the Oldhim killer in Blitz. Now, with all of this happening, though, my fear now is what happened. Does fatigue become the game plan? Immediately I read this and I think, well, I want to sleeve up my OTK Prism list now. And now at least my OTK Prism list doesn't fatigue. It tries to lock you out of the game, which is, I think, a little bit more reasonable. But fatigue Oldhim, fatigue Prism, fatigue Bravo.
Right.
Though Briar, losing Ball Lightning, Briar's whole end game against fatigue is gone.
Briar's. Yeah, it is. You can't stack for your right. The game plan against Oldhim was to pitch for your sting ball, and now you don't have that.
So that's
very interesting.
That's a well, I shouldn't say it's a problem, but that's an interesting take. I'm excited that we're getting this news now and not 2 weeks before ProQuest season, because now we actually have time to kind of brew and figure out the meta a little bit before we even get Everfest. And this gives us something to do while we chill and wait for Everfest to come, which is cool, because like all my brewing up to this point, I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm just brewing for fun. And now I actually have purpose to brew again.
Right. Yeah, right. There's been kind of a lull, right? This is January's been kind of the fun month. You can kind of just do what you want, because all the the last competitive stuff is over. The next stuff hasn't come out yet, and you've been kind of flexible. But now this definitely opens up some. You think there's some unintended casualties here with the bans? I guess
Katsu.
I'm not super yeah, right. Katsu's plunder run plan is done.
Yeah, aggro Katsu takes a hit for sure.
That definitely is going to have to find some alternative ways of getting off their big turn.
Who else?
That fundamentally. How much was Ball Lightning in Lexi variants?
Yeah.
Do you think that?
You know what?
Do you think that's
without having unfortunately tested that hero as much as I'd like? What I did find, especially, and mind you, thankfully the ban doesn't affect limited. Because in limited, you're heavily relying on those drafted Ball Lightnings, but in CC, I mean, I've seen Lexi both rely on arrows and a mix of arrows and non-arrow attack actions. So I think anybody who's looking to kind of synergize off, Frazzle and Buzzbolt and get some extra points of damage there is taking a hit. Electrify sees. Electrify doesn't synergize off of Ball Lightning anymore.
I think Electrify might go into the plunder run spot for some of these guys. Yeah,
because it replaces itself.
Yeah, you know what? Your Electrifies, your Sotomaros, your from the Arsenal draw. If played from Arsenal, draw a card. Yeah. I think that's your benefit, right? That's more than anything else. Plunder run gave the boost, but the conditional draw card. So now you're, especially on hybrid. I'm going to write this down. I'm going to have you edit this out so that our spicy tech can go. Right. So you're I think Electrify is probably what goes in for Plunder Run. And I think it goes in easy with hybrid because you have the blue pitch anyways to pay the cost and cover everything else you're doing. And you know what? Depending on what you have, I think that might extend Channel Mount Heroic's longevity because you're going to be easily pitching two. You can pitch two cards that turn, right? If you play Electrify, pitch one, and if you have your Grasp out and pitching to make a Rune Chant, or is something along those lines, you're going to be playing probably some one-cost attack actions instead of some Ball Lightnings, but you're going to have more opportunities than you might have to keep Channel Mount Heroic out longer, which I'm sure thrills people who are against it.
Yeah.
I'm just downloading all that now.
We are literally processing this as we report.
Yeah, right. This is happening in real time. This is our real reaction. This is the world's first taste of my processing things as it happens in real time and just blurting out the things on my mind. But that's probably where I go there. But yeah, I think it doesn't. I mean, it definitely hurts Briar. It'll be interesting to see how that changes things up. I definitely think Briar goes back to being kind of fair. I'm definitely interested to see. I don't know where Chain has evolved recently, where if Plunder Run... See, Chain's in that funny little area because of... you're probably going to shackle slightly more, right? You started shackling less because you weren't going for the Blood Debt route. You were kind of shackling efficiently, but you had those Plunder Runs to help some of that early stuff and... get your card draw in, and you still had some pretty impactful attacks. Now maybe you're going back to shackling a little more aggressively because that's going to be your main route for access to more cards, and you get back into more of an aggro plan with Chain.
Yeah, exactly.
I think it does put Oldhim as the boogeyman now, though.
It does,
right? I think that's now Oldham's thing is it can block, right? It can block 18 damage in a turn.
That's so insane.
Right? Completely block out your offense. Even if you can dump your entire hand out. It can block it out. Everything's been pitched. It can fatigue you right out, attack with the Winter's Will, get your Frostbite, and it can stack so that you're on no cards and it hits you, with an Oakenold, fused. So you've got nothing left that it needs to pit. It's putting so many cards, excuse me. It's putting so many cards back that it's, you needed to have, right, against Oldhim, you had to plan for your end game sequences, right? You knew you were going almost to fatigue, and Briar had the built-in one, right, with sting, sting, ball, ball, ball. Yep. That's no longer. So what are you stacking that goes over the top at that point? Are you fishing for something crazy like a double channel and hope you get into like a Tome of Harvest with an arsenal, something like that? Like, I'm thinking from Briar's perspective, but I'm thinking from I know Katsu likes to have that setup there where you were probably looking for a plunder run from Arsenal to start your surging strike line, and hoping that and hoping that you had most of the line in front of you anyway, so you didn't have to search much for it. But those end game plans that revolved around these banned cards, you're gonna have to change. You got to change how you play that game now.
And I think this is in part LSS going, all right, we see that you figured out aggro. We see that you understand how to play an efficient game. Now we're going to force you to learn a new game, and we're going to force you to learn how to play a setup game and how to overcome fatigue now. And that's going to be that's going to be kind of the next part of the game that we as the global player base need to figure out. And it's funny because I had this gut feeling, I had this thought a little while ago that I think Guardian is the next boogeyman. I think Guardian is going to be the next Runeblade. And just like that, this ban comes down the line and we might actually be there. I think it
definitely hamstrings those, I think, it's funny because I think at the time, and this, maybe this is my inexperience talking, but, 5 minutes before this was released, I felt like Briar was in an okay place, even with Channel Mount Heroic being there, because it did still have the problems that LSS mentioned against the Ice Heroes. But among those two, and things like... I know Viscerai was coming up and able to put Briar on its back foot and really do some damage, win some games. Chain's coming out there and making a real impact. But there's been, there are other heroes out there that you're not, granted, maybe two of those are, so you might have 3 Runeblades and a couple others, but that's a story for a different day. But I felt in terms of like the individual decks, you still had some play there, and even Katsu's been coming up and been able to do some damage as well. I've seen some brews that have been able to handle it, so it just feels like LSS let Briar, let the meta do its thing, and I thought it was there, or at least close to it. So I'm a little surprised to see it now. This whole the emergency ban and restricted announcement here.
Yeah, this is big. This is way bigger than any other news we've gotten in the past few weeks, and I'm glad it dropped right as it did, right as we're in the midst of recording, so we're able to just kind of break it down right away. I do think this is, since we're doing this live, this is going to cut into some of the other topic matter for today. I think we've got our level up moment to do still. I think before that, I do want to still quickly talk about the 2 new spoilers we did get, the Guardian card and the new hero. Why don't we first talk about the Guardian card? Macho Grande.
Guardian card. Macho Grande.
And right off the bat, I'm loving the memes that are coming out with this card. Macho Man Randy Savage, Macchiato Grande, Ariana Grande, like just hilarious. Another thing that's amazing about our community. But
they are hilarious. The best thing I like about this card is they found a picture of me to stick right on there. I don't know how they got that, but there I am flexing away. Unbelievable.
What do you see? Like, Macho Grande is a common. It's what, 7 for 10 in red, dominate, 9 in yellow, 8 in blue, blocks for 3. It's just a vanilla damage, but it does come with the built-in dominate. I've heard some people say it's kind of the non-elemental version of Glacial Footsteps. Costs 1 more, but you don't have to fuse.
Yep.
Do you see this making a splash in Guardian?
Well, I think I definitely think the blue has room there. I don't think anyone's going to look at the yellow too much. I do think the red has, so like Glacial Footsteps, right? There's some builds on Oldhim. You have the fatigue, and then you have the ones that try to finish out, right? And being able to have one of these, a Glacial Footsteps as an end game attack, right? A dominated Glacial Footsteps is a big hit. And I think one of the complaints against Oldhim that I've heard is that it can't, it sometimes has trouble closing out games, right? You have to pitch exactly right. You're playing this fatigue strategy. You're doing these. You have to make all these things work, and you're blocking out 1,000,000 points, but the actual the actual raw damage output isn't quite there. It's a little lacking, right? So Glacial Footsteps is a big part of how Oldhim can finish games, but I think Macho Grande can fit into that slot as well, right? You have an accessible large attack with the ability to dominate. Everybody loves a dominated double-digit attack, so I think that there is definitely room there for it. Maybe something in Blitz that might be more realistic to come around and see again for its particular applications, but I definitely see the blue making its rounds into Guardian decks, both Oldhim and Bravo, and I do think there's some potential on the red as a pretty solid finisher, and you know what, it's really great in Commoner too. We don't have to get into Commoner right now, but I guess so. I do think there's some potential there.
Yeah. So,
like 10 damage is a lot, right? No matter how you look at it. So, the blue fits right into everything Guardians want to do, and the red, I think, can definitely do some damage. Now, if we get into, not to do some overlapping here, but if Valda brings the ability to bring some Seismic Surge tokens, a red Macho Grande that ends up costing 3 for dominated 10. You know what I'm saying? That might change how we feel about that card at first, because obviously Valda's gonna hopefully get some cards that produce multiple Seismic Surge tokens, and if you stop looking at that 7 as a 7 and start thinking of it as more of a 3 or 4, if that ability is there, I think that changes our perspective a little bit, especially on the red.
Yeah.
So I think that's something to keep in mind, especially with Valda.
Yeah, I think 10 for 3, 10 for 4. I think probably realistically 4 is probably what you're hoping to see Macho Grande cost in Valda. But even at that, 10 dominate for 4, or probably, I still don't see the red getting ran. Like, I think if you've got access to Spinal Crush or things like that, you'd rather run those.
Yes,
but the blue, so. 8 for 4 dominate, 8 for 3 dominate, you're happy with that still. You can block with a couple cards and then pitch one card, play it from Arsenal. Life's good there. Anything else on Macho Grande?
No, I think it's pretty straightforward. I think it blocks for 3. the blue pitches for 3. It does what you need it to do. I think there's a lot of those, common blue guardian attacks, and this probably slots into some of the lesser popular ones that you were just pitching out anyways, because it does have that built-in dominate, so you don't have to activate Bravo on it. So I think that will probably replace insert
replace those blue overloads everybody's running.
Yeah, a little slight upgrade on the dominate attack.
Well, no, I think then that brings us into our other spoiler. This one's super interesting. I am incredibly excited for this. We got to see our second hero of Everfest, another young hero, and I do think we're only going to get young heroes. But this one being an elemental and being somebody we haven't gotten really a lot of support for since Crucible, a wizard. We are seeing Islander, a young wizard, a young elemental wizard with an ice wizard. And Islander reads, if it's not your turn, you may play non-attack action cards with blue color strips from your arsenal as though they were instant. And whenever you play an ice card during an opponent's turn, create a frostbite token under their control. And this one is... I was so curious as to what and how they were going to expand on the wizard class. Like, Kano seems so thought out, and it's like, what else do you do? And I think they did a really good job of saying, hey, we're not done with wizard, we're going to present some new unique ideas. And I'm super excited to brew with Islander. I'm already thinking about like playing Gaze the Ages from Arsenal, or what's the other one? This Round's on Me. That one's another one I'm excited to play from Arsenal. The big thing I'm curious about is how are we refilling our arsenal?
That's where my mind went as well, right? Because the way this sets up right now is that you're putting in one card from Arsenal and you're playing it as if it were an instant. That turn, that might be the catalyst to play other things as an instant. I'm not terribly well versed in Wizard, so forgive me if I'm ignorant on some of the abilities there. You're going to have to... So, this feels like, you're going to put, depending on what goes in the arsenal, you have a very solid ice control deck, right? You're probably going to play your Channel Lake Frigids, go in there. Yeah. I think people at first are going to be looking for those ice cards that you're going to force a discard or pay kind of scenario with the is it Winter's Bright?
Yeah, Winter's Bite there. Pay one or discard a card.
Things of that nature. But I guess without seeing what else is going on, you're still limited on what you can play as an instant as a whole. In order to take real advantage, perhaps, of how that's played, you're going to have a super defensive shell. Unless you have one of two things, right? You're going to have a card that turns it into almost like a ranger variant, right? You're going to have to try and reload it some way and put cards in your arsenal that you can repeatedly play as instant.
Which I have wondered if we'll see the reload mechanic extend into ice cards. I could see possibly us getting something in Everfest like Wizard Reload or Ice Reload. That would be really cool.
Yeah. I think it's definitely kind of a necessity here if you want to do more than, right? The way that this looks right now, and given the existing card pool, you're finding one controlling card to play as an instant from your arsenal, like a Channel Lake Frigid, and then going on. You got to imagine furthering your defense with other. You're playing defense reactions. You're doing, you're playing your sync blows. You're blocking out whatever attack, or you're killing their attack in one Blizzard, right? Any one of those things where you're stopping their attack, but you become this super defensive focused. And then my question would be, how do you finish that game up? I don't know. You can
still stir fork.
Can you play that? You can still do your crazy wizard things where you're hitting for lethal. I guess I don't know how you would fish the cards out. I feel like
I can still see something like because you've still got access to Storm Striders, so you can still play. Yeah. You can still Storm Striders. Say play a Stir the Red Aether Winds Red.
Teach me wizard. Teach me wizard because I only know playing against.
Fair.
That's what I know.
Yeah, so I could still see something. Yeah, like sit on your Storm Striders. You can. When you get your opponent in that lethal range where it's like, so like say if you're going to be Stir the Aether Winds into, Red Stir into Crucible into Fork Lightning into Metacarpus Nodes, that's 14 damage. And like typically the thought process when you're looking for the kill with Kano is I need to deal damage plus X, where X is your life total plus X is their arcane barrier, because that's everything beyond that is unblockable. So if you can control the game, chip your opponent down to like, if they're running Arcane Barrier 3, you need to get them down to 14 health, and then win the game that way. That's an option I could see. You lose the ability to play off the top of your deck, which is part of what makes Kano really powerful. But I think the addition of the ice cards like Channel, Lake Frigid, and Blizzard definitely help compensate for that. Slow your opponent down such as they are no longer able to just aggro you to death. I did notice Islanders' health is 18, so a little bit more of a health buffer compared to Kano. You've got 3 more points of damage that you can absorb comfortably there. I think this one though is going to be one where like just from we need to see what we get from Everfest. It'll kind of support Wizard and support Ice, and then also we're going to need to brew it a bit and see how it plays out. But I am so excited to brew with Islander. Like I keep refreshing FabDB just to see if like she's up on like the build with heroes yet, just so I can start tinkering with her on TTS.
Now, do you were you around when Crucible came out?
I wasn't around when Crucible came out, but I was around for part of the Crucible meta and like seeing Kano be as and Kano's still dominant in Blitz. But I was around for part of it.
Was I asked because do you think Everfest is going to introduce enough new cards to be able to fuel something like this hero? And like we've seen Valda, a Bright Axe with a brand new type of an ability, does something new with Seismic Surge tokens. You know, odds are good that we're going to find some new variants on heroes. Do you think that there's going to be a card base exclusively in Everfest that would help support these guys into viable decks?
I think so.
Was Crucible like that? I suppose I know there's a lot of Crucible cards now in Warrior, and you said Wizard. Did those completely change? Did Crucible completely change the landscape?
Crucible
of the game, like enough. Were there enough cards there, and do you think that Everfest is going to have enough cards there to impact it in that kind of way?
I do believe so. Crucible, from my understanding, Crucible completely flipped the meta on its head. Kano was not viable before Crucible, and for an example, and Warrior was completely once we got the addition of Spoils of War and Warrior, that was so meta dominating. And then Kasai became Kasai was instantly viable. The cash in mechanic, copper tokens, all that was so good in both Warriors. I fully expect Everfest to flip the meta on its head, and it's compared to our there's just shy of 200 cards we're getting in Everfest, and I think it's 198 is what it is or something like that, and it's the same actually card count as we got in Crucible, and it won't be much, and we have since Crucible's release, we've seen the addition of one class. Yeah, we got Illusionist. We saw the addition of talents, and I think that's going to make things interesting. I'm curious to see how I think LSS is capable of providing support for every hero in every class. Not maybe like it won't be perfect, but I think they'll I think whatever they've got up their sleeve, they're going to do a good job of providing the global support we need for the most part for the meta. And on top of that, I'm really curious to see what Easter eggs they provide.
Yeah, me too. I am definitely intrigued on what they're going to bring there. I guess seeing the Wizard now and the Guardian, it's just interesting to think about like how many cards you need to make something like that work, and if you're going to have those cards available to you all in that one set. Yeah. It's a curiosity,
and
because there's more, right? There's more coming. There's going to be a lot of variety in this. Hopefully a lot more fun stuff happening. I think people are very intrigued by Icelander here and Valda, so I think it's on the right track. I guess I'm excited more than anything else. I like to see what they're going to do, what they're going to do with the set, so that I can spend way too much money on it.
Yeah. Oh God. Out. Yeah. I going into the ProQuest season, only having 2 weeks to actually like get all the cards I need, and it's It's a good thing that Flesh and Blood is my only hobby currently, because it's an expensive and all time consuming hobby.
Yeah, I am fortunate to have a birthday close enough where good. I know what I'm asking for. I'm asking for some money for some Flesh and Blood.
Perfect.
That's what I'm doing.
Level up.
This week on the Level Up moment, and this actually falls in perfectly with just the new spoilers we've gotten, the new banner, or the new set coming out, the new banner restricted updates we've just gotten, because now there's going to be so much to figure out and adapt to. We wanted to this week touch on something that is an integral tool to reading meta. And that is the Archetype Triangle. This is something that I think like a lot of higher level guys who come from Magic know a bit about this, and anybody who wants to play high level Flesh and Blood either already knows about it or should know about it, but it's a pretty simple concept for anybody who's newer to the game as well. And the Archetype Triangle is as simply put as you can think of obviously a triangle, and at the three ends of it you've got control at one end, you've got combo or setup if control's at the top, combo is at the bottom right, and then aggro is at the bottom left. And then beyond that, mid-range, or in Flesh and Blood, mid-range being a very different, or a different concept than in other games where like in Magic, if mid-range is like value creatures in some disruption while still having some aggro, I think mid-range is a bit more in Flesh and Blood, the ability to pivot and the ability to present either via sideboard or just throughout the game, just through card inclusion already, the ability to pivot from, say, like a control strategy to a setup strategy to an aggressive strategy. Yeah, mid-range sitting at the middle of the triangle. The whole purpose of the triangle is to be able to map out, if my opponent's doing X, then I probably need to do Y or Z to overcome it. And so the way I basically think of it, as simply put, is aggro beats combo or setup beats control, and control beats aggro. So then that's to say that your combo or your setup is what you're doing, because control is making a or including a set of cards that allow you to block out as much of what your opponent is trying to present as possible. And Old Tim emphasizes this the best, and Bravo probably the second best, where it's they can block out as much damage as is presented and just negate all their opponent's big threats, and then once their opponent's out of threats, then they either win through the fatigue route or through just then turning around and presenting bigger threats than their opponent can overcome. And that strategy works great for beating out aggro. And aggro is just being able to present a fast, hard, hot strategy that overwhelms your opponent before your opponent's able to counteract or do anything to enact their game plan. And that aggro strategy beats the setup strategy so well, because the setup strategy is trying to maybe play out energy potions or put together a certain amount of cards that once they all play out together, play out something that it is so overwhelming that your opponent can't do anything about it, which then comes back around suit and overcomes the control strategy. Do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, so I am an aggro player. So one of the things about the Archetype Triangle that I believe is that in order to have a healthy trading card game, I think that triangle needs to exist. As soon as you're a two-dimensional game where you're facing aggro, one archetype versus the other are the only two viable archetypes, I think that's a bad sign for a trading card game. So when a game does have at least that triangle and perhaps more, then I think you're presenting with a healthy game. Coming from an aggro perspective here, so aggro to me in Flesh and Blood is starting on the attack and pressing the tempo advantage from turn one all the way through. Aggro's vulnerabilities come from the idea that it can whiff, it can falter, and it can be pivoted on easily when that happens, right? If you're able to maintain that pressure and that tempo advantage throughout the game, your opponent doesn't have a chance, right? Which is why combo and setup, I think, match up pretty poorly with it, because it really wants to start on the back foot, which is exactly where aggro wants to be, right? So you're playing into aggro's into its play style, and you're not presenting anything back for that pivot. Control, on the other hand, can negate what aggro is doing and cause it to falter, or make choices that it doesn't want to after a while. So you have like those fatigue type, those strategies, those life gain, strategies where you're in that super defensive shell. You have too much life for the aggro deck to even capitalize on or even accrue enough damage on. And then once you're out of gas, there you might not be able to present lethal no matter what. Aggro Katsu is a pretty famous advantage, famous version of that, right? So if your aggro Katsu runs into that control deck and you've burnt out all your reds and all you have, you run into that situation where you got nothing but blues, you might be able to try and Kadachi them to death. But if they're at 15 life, you're not really doing much to their game plan at that point. Yeah. It does what these different things, these different archetypes do present, is your it helps determine how you sideboard and what you're going to do with your deck. So Flesh and Blood sideboards seem to be sideboards sometimes transition you into versions of these other archetypes, right? They start shifting you around. If you think of this archetype triangle, and that Flesh and Blood is kind of on a spectrum in that triangle, and you have your little imaginary abacus beads constantly shifting one way or the other up the vertices I'm not strong on math. I think that's what they're called. But being able to sideboard and adapt to those different strategies is where that comes into play. Being able to identify what your deck is, what its weak points are, and how to work around those weak points is how you can become more successful at the game, right? So control beats aggro unless aggro finds a way to work around control.
Yes.
And if it can do that, now you're cooking with fire here, right? Combo setup loses to aggro unless it finds a way to work around. Now, as we discussed, control has an advantage over aggro. Combo setup, I'm thinking when I see combo, I'm thinking OTK Viscerai. When you say combo setup, correct me if I'm wrong. We can edit it out if it is.
Oh no, 100%. I agree. Like combo, like that's a classic example of a combo. Like I mean, that's probably right, combo control that's my big, where it's like they're
right. So that's right. Your base OTK Viscerai build is a setup, right? It's pure setup. You want your rune chance. You're looking to build up enough rune chance to break your Skeleton into Sonata and murder your opponent in one fell swoop, right? Quintessential combo setup. Against an aggro deck, if you don't have that, if you don't have everything you need immediately, right? There are some times where you get the nuts and you're able to get your rune chance and you can combo off, which is great. If you don't get exactly what you need, all of a sudden you have what used to be ball lightnings and generic attacks with Go Again, with Briar, Katsu coming at you with a bunch of ninja attacks, and you're on the back foot. You've lost your you're on that back foot. You can't pivot, you can't set up your combo, and you're dead before you can have an opportunity to crack it, or you're forced to crack it early and you whiff, right? That's exactly what aggro wants to do. Viscerai's sideboard has a lot more defensive strategy to it and helps pivot or helps transition OTK Viscerai into more of that control type, and that once it starts shifting over there, it starts to have a better game against that aggro deck, and now you can start to stretch things out a little bit and you can delay your setup because you have more control cards in there, and aggro now has to play a longer game than it wants to, and now it has to worry about sputtering up.
Yeah,
that relationship between all of those and Flesh and Blood sideboards is, I think, quintessential in what we're talking about here on being able to level up, recognizing your deck archetype, and understanding that there are some, like Prism, right? Prism has a very transitional sideboard. It can play. It's very versatile. But being able, but that's why it's a great deck. But it's also very complicated to pilot, right? Good pilots on a Prism deck know how to sideboard for specific matchups and be able to move that that kind of archetype descriptor one way or another and play around with what it can do in any given matchup. And Viscerai is the same way, right? It's very versatile. Its sideboard can help it move to different styles of gameplay, which matter depending on your matchup here. So recognizing your deck archetype, what your sideboard plan should be, and what it's meant to do, whether it's a few key cards for a matchup where your deck will never change what it's doing, but perhaps you're putting in a couple extra 6 attacks for Prism, or some extra Command and Conquers for an Arsenal loving hero, or something more transitional where you're going from a aggro mid-range to more of a control by throwing in maybe throwing in 9 D-reacts or something like that, but and still maintaining your core game plan there. But that is, I think that is kind of what we're talking about here.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, moving forward, like if you're able to identify what it is you're doing or what it is you're trying to do, or be able to, like, if you're able to identify what's going on in your meta so that you can then overcome it with a focused strategy. That'll be the where you'll find your level up within understanding the Archetype Triangle and using it to your advantage. I think that brings us into the end of episode 7 of the Combat Chain podcast. Big episode, lots to dive into. Some big changes for the Combat Chain. Really excited that you guys are here alongside us for it. Before we wrap up here, as always, you can find us anywhere you listen to podcasts, on Apple Music, on Spotify, Google Podcasts, wherever. We're also on YouTube. Pat and I are going to be sitting down here over the next little bit to dive in and figure out some good video content for you all as well. Pat, you are on Twitter. What's your Twitter handle?
You can find me on Twitter at PatSmashGood, and that is where you can find me on all the relevant social medias and on Discord.
And then on top of that, we do have myself. I am starting to play around with Twitter more. You can find me at FomTooleryTCG, FomTooleryTCG. You also have our Combat Chain Twitter, www.twitter.com/thecombatchain, or just at thecombatchain. We are on Patreon as well. We are starting to try to launch that, just because we do have there are some small little fees with hosting and what have you that if we could get covered, we would be incredibly grateful for. Now our Patreon is a little hard to find for some reason. We're not big enough yet, is the reality. So you can't just Google search the Combat Chain or search us on Patreon, unfortunately. But I will link everything in the YouTube profile. We are available on, if you guys just want to email us and ask any questions, thecombatchain@gmail.com. And then lastly, we are on YouTube just at 28 subscribers so far, and we'd like to see that grow. So we've decided we're going to do a little bit of a giveaway here. We're going to do a 100 subscriber giveaway. So at the 100 subscriber mark, we will go and randomly select somebody from our subscriber list, and they will be we've got a little prize package put together here. We're going to have a couple Gamegenic deck boxes, as well as a cold foil data doll. So that's kind of fun. Yeah, lots going on. Yeah, I think that's everything. Pat, once again, welcome to the Combat Chain. We're really excited to have you.
I'm excited to be a part of it. This has been fantastic. I look forward to doing this a bunch more times.
I'm so excited. And I think that's everything. And until next week, we're closing the Combat Chain.
That happened. We got breaking news. I wasn't even